Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, January 13, 2026. The Supreme Court hears cases challenging state laws banning transgender girls and women from playing on school sports teams. And according to many news articles, a majority of the justices are leaning towards letting those laws stand. President Donald Trump tours a Ford pickup truck plant in Dearborn, Michigan, before speaking at the Detroit Economic Club. As the Labor Department reports, inflation in December rose 2.7% versus a year ago, 2.6% when not considering volatile food and energy prices. U.S. House takes up a bill to change a Biden-era definition of who is a tipped worker. President Trump encourages anti-government protesters in Iran, again telling them help is on the way, as the death toll reportedly tops 2,000. Congressional Progressive Caucus, in the aftermath of ICE officer shootings, calls for reforms of immigration and customs enforcement, militarized tactics, in their words, before any further federal funding is approved. And the House Republican leading the congressional investigation into Jeffrey Epstein says the Oversight Committee will move to hold former President Bill Clinton in contempt after he did not show up today to testify under subpoena in a closed-door deposition. Associated Press writing the Supreme Court on Tuesday seemed likely to uphold state laws barring transgender girls and women from playing on school athletic teams. Lower courts ruled for the transgender athletes in Idaho and West Virginia who challenged the state bans, but the conservative-dominated Supreme Court gave no indication after more than 3 hours of arguments that it would follow suit. Instead, at least 5 of the 6 conservatives on the 9-member court indicated they would rule that the laws don't violate either the Constitution or the landmark Title IX law, which prohibits discrimination in education and has produced dramatic growth in girls' and women's sports. And that was from AP. Here's part of today's oral argument. Justice Brett Kavanaugh questioning Joshua Block, ACLU attorney, and he represented the transgender girl athlete in the West Virginia case.
Question on the law. Yes. On Title IX. I mean, I hate that a kid who wants to play sports might not be able to play sports. Hate that. But it's kind of a zero-sum game for a lot of teams. And someone who tries out and makes it, who is a transgender girl, will bump from the starting lineup, from playing time, from the team, from the all-league, and those things matter to people big time, will bump someone else. And so one way to resolve it, as you say, is the facts, try to figure out, is there really a competitive advantage? I think we're going to get a lot of scientific uncertainty about that, a lot of debate about that, a lot of different district courts. The other way on the law, one way on the law is, okay, well, sex in Title IX and in Javits meant biological sex, and it's up to Congress to adjust that going forward if they want, given, as you say, and your co-counsel said earlier, people are learning more about this, and maybe there really is no advantage. Well, if that's true, and some states are operating under that basis, that's the way to go. But for now, at least the law says biological sex, and I think we have to recognize on both sides the zero sum. It's not like, oh, just to add another person to the team. That's not how sports works. It's someone else is going to get disadvantaged. So I just want you to address that.
I'm happy to, and I guess I have 3 answers. The first is I completely understand that many parts of sports are zero-sum, but this law isn't limited to zero-sum opportunities. So BPJ played on the cross-country team where there were no cuts. She came in near the back. It wasn't
but I'm sorry to interrupt, but you wouldn't have a different rule if she was finishing in the top 5.
No, but it wasn't a zero-sum.
Or if they had cuts.
But what I'm saying is
in this particular case, but usually with teams, I don't mean to, just don't want to get out of that. Usually with teams, they're cuts.
Yes.
Those mean a lot to people. There's starting lineups. Those mean a lot to people. There's who gets a college recruit. That means a lot to people.
Yes. I just want to say that there still are some areas where there are win-win solutions. I think even being able to be on practices with a team consistent with your gender identity instead of your sex assigned at birth can be enormously important. So I think some scenarios are zero-sum, but not everything having to do with sports is. And I do think that one of the vices of this law is that it sweeps so broadly that even win-win solutions are taken off the table. In terms of aspects where it's zero-sum, no one likes to lose. No one likes to not make the team. And people often don't make the team. The cisgender girls don't make the team when competing against other cisgender girls all the time. And the question, I think, is whether it's an unfair advantage to not make the team because a transgender girl participated. And if there is no sex-based biological distinction there, then I think it's an unfortunate situation, but I think it's the unfortunate situation that comes with having a zero-sum game, not inherent unfairness. Then the third thing is, I think however the court resolves this case, I really urge the court not to do it based on a definition of sex argument. We are not disputing in this case that West Virginia can have its definition of sex. Our argument is it's using this definition to inflict discrimination and deny equal athletic opportunity, but we are not saying their definition of sex is wrong. However, I don't think it follows that Title IX created some national definition of sex that preempted states' ability to say, actually, we are most concerned about discrimination that happens through gender roles.
Attorney Joshua Block, a question by Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh in today's oral argument, the case BPJ v. West Virginia. There was another case heard today also on this subject, Little v. Hickox, that comes out of Idaho. Over 3 hours of oral argument covered live on C-SPAN Radio and C-SPAN Television. You can find it all out at our video library at cspan.org. After the oral arguments, there were news conferences on the steps of the Supreme Court. There was also some noisy demonstrations on both sides of the issue heard in the background. Here is John Bursch, senior counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom.
Today, Idaho and West Virginia asked the Supreme Court to allow states to protect women's sports by affirming a basic truth. Women and men are biologically different. Yet today, the ACLU asked the court to make it impossible to define sex accurately. Identity does not determine your sex, and laws that distinguish between the sexes do not violate federal law when biological differences matter, like on the playing field and in the locker room. No drug can make a man into a woman. Puberty blockers and testosterone suppression do not erase the physical advantages males have over females. All athletes can compete, but they must do so on a level playing field. Now, you heard today that no one is being harmed by this. Justice Kavanaugh said that's not correct. Sports is a zero-sum game. Someone has to win, someone has to lose. In West Virginia, BPJ defeated more than 400 girls over 1,000 times, winning 57 medals that should have gone to female athletes. That's the real-world cost of ignoring biological reality. Over the last 50 years, under Title IX, women have made historic gains in rights and opportunity. Athletics teaches leadership, grit, discipline, teamwork, and so much more. 94% of women in the C-suite played sports, and we will not allow men to take roster spots, scholarships, and championships away from women. That's not progress. No girl should be sidelined in her own sport. No girl should be taught that safety is something she must surrender. Every girl deserves a real chance to compete and to win. Thank you. We're happy for your questions now. I can take the legal questions. The AGs are here as well. Yes, questions.
How do you respond to the assertion today that in those cases where there's not a biological difference, based upon testing and other things, how do you account for that? And also, can you talk about why the laws are discriminatory in that they target trans women but also not trans men? What's the difference there?
Well, first, we categorically reject that there's no advantage. If you look at the Olympic race with Leah Thomas, Thomas suppressed testosterone for more than 2 years, and yet that didn't make a difference. He won a gold medal in the 500 meters and beat 2 former Olympians because the diminution in his athletic ability from testosterone wasn't enough to overcome the 9% gap between men and women in that sport, and that's true across all the sports. As far as the discrimination point, there isn't any discrimination when you distinguish based based on biology. And if someone wants to challenge the example of girls being able to play in boys' sports but not vice versa, they're able to do that. But that's not what this case is about. This is about making sure that women like these have the opportunity to compete and win in their own sports.
What's your reaction to Joshua Block saying sex should not be defined?
That's completely bizarre. I don't know how you can decide a case interpreting sex under Title IX and under the Equal Protection Clause by not defining sex. Sex, when Title IX was passed, meant biological sex. The entire statute is written with biological distinctions. It even refers to each of the sexes. I don't know how the court can do that. And it says a lot that he felt and the ACLU felt they had to tell the court not to define sex in order for them to survive this case.
I heard you mention Justice Kavanaugh's comments in there. Are you feeling at this point
Well, we definitely think they heard our arguments, and I heard a lot of things that I was really encouraged about today. You heard Justice Sotomayor basically come out and say that she thinks that under the Title IX regulations that the West Virginia and Idaho laws are valid. That's an amazing accomplishment today. In addition, you heard Justice Kavanaugh talking about the zero-sum game, how it denies girls the right to compete and the right to win when we allow boys in their space. You heard Chief Justice Roberts say that this case is very different than Gorsuch, because when you're talking about sex distinctions, as in these sports laws, that is not discriminating against the LGBT community. So we heard a lot that we're thankful to hear today, and we hope that the court will uphold the right that girls can compete in their own sports fairly and safely.
John Bursch, senior counsel with the group Alliance Defending Freedom, at a news conference on the steps of the Supreme Court after today's oral argument in the two cases challenging the laws in Idaho and West Virginia banning transgender girls from girls' school sports. Alliance Defending Freedom, he said, is a co-counsel to Idaho and West Virginia attorneys general, who were also present at this news conference. Also holding a separate news conference, some of the advocates on the other side of the argument, including two lawyers who actually had argued moments before the Supreme Court.
Hi everyone, my name is Josh Block. I'm a senior counsel for the ACLU's LGBTQ project. I'm counsel for both the BPJ and Hecox case, and I gave oral argument on behalf of Becky in the BPJ case. And we have Becky and her mom Heather here with us. They were in the courtroom together. And I think today we had a chance to tell the Supreme Court the reality of what it's like to be a girl like Becky, who just wants to be able to play on a team with her friends and have fun. And we're hopeful that the court heard our message, and we're very grateful for all the support that has been shown for Becky over the past week. I think it's not easy for anyone to be a kid, and especially not easy to be a trans kid. And if it weren't for people like Becky and her mom, I think we'd all be in a very worse place right now. Do you want to say? You should introduce yourself.
Me?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Hartnett, partner at Cooley Law Firm, and I was co-counsel in both cases. I argued today on behalf of Lindsay Hecox. I just want to say I'm proud to stand with this group and this amazing client and mother, and so many people that made this possible to tell the story of what's going on here. I think I was particularly proud today to be able to make sure that the court understood the serious history of discrimination the transgender community has faced, and I'm just so proud to stand by all of these colleagues as we try to help bring the truth to the debate and also just bring some justice here in the court. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Chase Strangio. I am co-counsel along with Kathleen and Josh, and I'm honored to be here representing BPJ and Lindsay Hecox before the Supreme Court. And the only thing I want to add is that in this moment, in so many halls of power, it feels like people are debating whether or not transgender people exist, whether or not we deserve protections under our Constitution and our civil rights statutes. And today in the Supreme Court, we were able to remind the 9 justices that we do exist, that we deserve protections just like everybody else, and that there has been a history of discrimination against us that warrants the court to take a closer look at the type of government targeting that we've seen over and over again from states and now from the federal government. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Lowy. I am Senior Counsel and Director of Constitutional Law Practice at Lambda Legal, and I am so proud to have stood with my colleagues in representing BPJ and her mom. Today, we had a chance to explain to the court what it really means in concrete terms to deny a kid the opportunity to access all of the things we want our kids to be able to access as they grow and become fully realized adults simply because of who they are, simply because they are transgender. That equal opportunity for our kids to grow and thrive is what our laws and Constitution demand, and that is what we are all here to fight for and will continue to fight for, and we are grateful for the opportunity to make that case to the court today.
Thank you very much.
Kevin Jennings, I'm the CEO of Lambda Legal. We were proud to be co-counsel in Becky's case. What this is about is something I learned as a high school teacher 40 years ago. Every kid has a right to play. Every kid has a right to belong. Every kid has a right to be treated equally. Becky Pepper Jackson is an American hero because she stood up for millions of other kids today and said, we belong, we matter, we are equal. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you very much. Josh, what is your definition of sex?
I don't think that's what's at issue in this case. What's at issue in this case is fair treatment for all kids. Sorry. Oh yeah. I was just saying I don't think that's what is at issue in this case. What's at issue in this case is fair treatment for all people, including cis people and trans people, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Joshua Block with the ACLU and other advocates, including one other attorney who argued before the Supreme Court in today's oral arguments in the two cases involving the transgender athlete laws in Idaho and West Virginia. It was on the steps of the Supreme Court. You could hear some demonstrations in the background. The Hill writing, the Supreme Court seemed receptive to state bans on transgender girls competing on girls' and women's school sports teams during high-stakes oral arguments Tuesday. Again, the oral arguments ran over 3 hours. We covered it live on the C-SPAN networks. You can find it all archived at our video library at cspan.org. A decision from the Supreme Court could come anytime, but likely at the end of the term in June. This is Washington Today. Turning to the economy, CNBC writing core U.S. consumer prices rose less than predicted in December, reinforcing hopes that inflation is tempering as the Federal Reserve contemplates its next move on interest rates. Excluding volatile food and energy prices, the Consumer Price Index showed a seasonally adjusted 0.2% gain on a monthly basis and 2.6% annually. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported Tuesday both were 0.1 percentage points below expectations. That was from CNBC. President Donald Trump spoke about the inflation report during a speech today at the Detroit Economic Club.
Joe Biden gave us a colossal stagflation catastrophe, but my administration's rapidly and very decisively ended that. We have quickly achieved the exact opposite of stagflation, almost no inflation and super high growth. So we have the highest growth we've ever had. Think of that. The highest growth we've ever had, and we've only been there 11 months. Think of what we can do for the rest of it. But do we have wood around here? I want to knock on a little wood. They have one little, everything's plastic nowadays. It's very tough. Now we have the greatest growth, and we have, inflation way, way down. But we inherited terrible growth, and we inherited the worst inflation in the history of our country. The fake news would say 49 years. So when I say the history, they give me a lot of time, but I believe it's the history. But let's say 49 years. Would you say 49 years is okay, right? It's pretty bad. What do you think, Mr. Senator, Mr. Future Senator? I'd say 49. What sounds worse, 49 years or history? I think 49 years almost sounds worse. Maybe I'll just use it and I won't argue with these people. As of this morning, core inflation for the past 3 months has been just 1.6%. The numbers were just announced just before I came on stage. And GDP is smashing expectations with the fastest growth for this country in many years. The fourth quarter is projected at 5.4%, and that's despite the Democrat shutdown where we lost at least 1.5 points. The Democrat shutdown, we would have had close to 7. Think of that, close to 7 they were projecting to. The fakers were projecting to. And if we keep deregulating and adding more capacity, like I saw today at Ford, and if we don't raise interest rates every time good news is mentioned. In the old days, I'm probably old. I used to be up at these lecterns and I'd say, I'm younger than pretty much everybody in the room. Now I say I'm older than pretty much everybody in the room. I like it the other way better, actually. But you're too young. But in the old days, when you had good numbers, interest rates would go down. When you had good numbers, the market would go through the roof. That's the way we're going to make it again. That's the old-fashioned way. That's the right way. Today, if you announce great numbers, they raise interest rates to try and kill it. So you can never really have the kind of rally you should have.
President Donald Trump at the Detroit Economic Club addressing the business leaders after touring a Ford assembly plant in nearby Dearborn, Michigan. On Capitol Hill in Washington, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, also spoke about the inflation report during his opening statement at a news conference after the regular Tuesday private lunches that Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans hold.
At a time when families are paying more, getting less, when grocery bills and energy costs are squeezing household budgets, Trump's focus is dangerously off track. Just this morning, we learned that inflation climbed again, driven by rising prices for food and energy, a clear sign that the affordability crisis is still biting working families and that the administration bears a large share of the blame for it. What's Trump's response to Americans struggling to make ends meet? More global adventurism, not relief at home. Trump is saying that we may be stuck in Venezuela for years. He's not afraid to put troops on the ground there. That's not what Americans want. That's not what he campaigned on when he said America first. That's why last week a broad bipartisan coalition of senators moved forward with the War Powers Resolution that I've championed with Senators Kaine, Schiff, and Paul. And now the Senate takes the next step. The Senate will vote to begin debate, and we hope to pass this resolution that clearly says Congress decides when and where America goes to war.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, a news conference on Capitol Hill. Wall Street today, the Dow down 398, NASDAQ down 24, S&P down 13. CNBC writing the S&P 500 fell on Tuesday as investors sold J.P. Morgan despite better than expected numbers and grappled with volatility from a flurry of President Donald Trump proposals floated in the past few days. One of those proposals is to cap credit card interest rates for a year at 10%. And CNBC writing that J.P. Morgan Chase CFO Jeremy Barnum hinted Tuesday the industry could fight President Trump's demand for credit card price controls, saying, quote, everything's on the table. U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, was asked at a House Republican leadership news conference today in Washington about his party's take on that 10% credit card interest rate cap plan.
President Trump is proposing a 10% cap on credit card interest rates as a part of an affordability push. How much support is in your caucus for that?
I talked with him about it briefly yesterday, and he is the president is the ideas guy, and what he's doggedly determined to do and laser focused upon doing is the same thing that we are, and that is reducing the cost of living, bringing down prices for the American people, and he's looking at every idea under the sun to do that. It's one of a large menu of ideas that have been proposed as something we ought to think about and investigate. Since I had the conversation with him, I've talked to a number of colleagues about that and what that would mean, and are there unintended consequences of that? And it's a complicated area. So I don't know. Like everything else, you would need legislation to do something like that, and we'd have a lot of work to build consensus around it. But you got to be very careful if you go forward in that. In our zeal to bring down costs, you don't want to have negative secondary effects of that. So, for example, one of the things that the president probably had not thought through, and others at first glance, it sounds great. We should bring down, interest rates to 10%. It would help everybody, all borrowers. There's a lot of Americans who have a lot of credit card debt. But then, what some of the experts have said is, well, but the problem is if you do that, then the credit card companies, the negative secondary effect is that they would just stop lending money, and maybe they cap what people are able to borrow at a very low amount. And then that would have a negative effect on a lot of people who work on revolving credit. So it's something that we got to be very deliberate about. The president understands that. He wants us to do the right thing by Americans. When he says America first, it comes from a sincere place in his heart and all of us. And what I love about this president is he's willing to think outside the box and propose ideas for us to work through to see if it will actually achieve the desired objective. And that's what we're in the process of doing every day around here. So again, I wouldn't get too spun up about ideas that are out of the box, that are proposed or suggested. The thing about this president is he's totally transparent, and he says often what he's thinking out loud. This is unusual because most presidents like Biden, we couldn't get anything out of him for 4 years. We didn't know what he was thinking, if he was thinking at all. So it's jarring for some Americans to hear a president who just says go, 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 go 24 hours a day to help the American people, and we're working through those ideas, and that's one of them we'll work through.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, at a news conference today with other House Republican leaders. More from the CNBC article. The average credit card rate nationally is 19.7% as of this month, according to a weekly survey from Bankrate.com, while rates for subprime borrowers and store-specific cards are typically higher. Fox News writing, a group of global central bank leaders issued a joint statement on Tuesday to express their support for Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell as he faces a criminal investigation from the Trump administration's Department of Justice. Powell announced on Sunday that the Justice Department served grand jury subpoenas to the Federal Reserve on Friday related to an investigation into perjury allegations stemming from his testimony before the Senate Banking Committee last summer on the Fed's renovation project. Released a rare video statement in which he said the probe is a pretext for applying political pressure on the Fed to lower interest rates. The group of central bankers wrote, "We stand in full solidarity with the Federal Reserve System and its chair, Jerome H. Powell. The independence of central banks is a cornerstone of price, financial, and economic stability in the interest of the citizens we serve." Reporting from Fox Business. President Trump was asked about the investigation as he left the White House today.
Well, he's billions of dollars over budget, so he either is incompetent or he's crooked. I don't know what he is, but he certainly doesn't do a very good job.
President Trump in the White House driveway as he was flying to Detroit to deliver that speech at the Detroit Economic Club. On Capitol Hill, the Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, was asked at a news conference about the Fed Chair Powell investigation.
You say confidently that the Justice Department is not being weaponized now that Jay Powell joins the list of Trump critics who are facing a criminal investigation?
I haven't seen charges filed or brought yet. There are allegations out there to which he is responding, but I've said this before, and I think, if the Justice Department is pursuing something, I hope they have a smoking gun or something, because I don't think you trifle with the Federal Reserve, with the central bank. It is critical to the financial markets in this country. It's critical to our economy. And so whatever is happening there, and I don't know what it is, and I think it's hard to comment until we do know what it is, but as I've said before, it better be real and it better be serious.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, at a news conference on Capitol Hill. Federal Reserve Bank of New York President John Williams was also asked about the investigation of Chair Jerome Powell. It was Monday night at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York City.
Obviously, I can't speak to any investigations or anything like that, but I will say that I've worked with Chairman Powell for over 13 years, and I've worked closely with him throughout that time. And he, throughout that time, he has been completely dedicated and committed to the Federal Reserve's mission to support the American people. And throughout that time, he's proven himself to be a man of impeccable integrity and a man who has been calmly leading the Federal Reserve through times of heightened uncertainty and led us very effectively. And I wanted to share that perspective from my point of view. One of the things that Chair Powell said in his remarks on Sunday was he highlighted the importance of independence of Senate. And I agree fully with that. And I will add that history teaches us lessons about this, that when there's attempts to unduly influence monetary policy decisions, when those are successful, those often lead to very unfortunate economic outcomes, including economic instability and high inflation. For me, on your final question of how does it affect us, we have a big job. I mentioned maximum employment or price stability. I mentioned this. My 100% of my focus and that of my colleagues thinking about how do we best achieve maximum employment and price stability. That's what I'm focused on, and that's what Will can be.
John Williams is the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York City Monday night. Jeanine Pirro, U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, posting Monday night. The attorney's office contacted the Federal Reserve on multiple occasions to discuss cost overruns and the chairman's congressional testimony, but were ignored, necessitating the use of legal process, which is not a threat. The word indictment has come out of Mr. Powell's mouth. No one else's. None of this would have happened if they had just responded to our outreach. This office makes decisions based on the merits, nothing more, nothing less. We agree with the chairman of the Federal Reserve that no one is above the law, and that is why we expect his full cooperation. That was the post from Jeanine Pirro, U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. The House of Representatives today took up a couple of bills dealing with wages and workers, one titled Tipped Employee Protection Act that would, according to the sponsors, clarify the Fair Labor Standards Act to better define tipped employees. Congressman Tim Walberg, Republican of Michigan, chair of the Education and Workforce Committee, presented the bill on the House floor.
Tipped workers are not clearly defined or protected under the law. This leaves their jobs vulnerable to the whims of administrative regulations, court rulings, and too often unclear guidance written by unelected bureaucrats that inconsistently interpret the rights of tipped workers. And that creates chaos for millions of workers. The Biden-Harris administration was perhaps the most striking example of government overreach and the harm it can do to working families' bottom lines. Its disastrous 80-20 rule required that no more than 20% of the work performed by tipped employees could be categorized as untipped work, and those untipped tasks could only be performed for 30 minutes at a time. Basically, this required minute-by-minute manager supervision to ensure workers were complying with the rule. Anyone in the service industry would tell you, in a high-paced environment like a restaurant or bar, that's next to impossible. But because tipped workers had no clear definition or proper protections under the FLSA, the Biden-Harris administration was free to try and impose overly complex timekeeping requirements that were impossible to enforce. For several years, this created an enormous headache for small businesses like restaurants and that heavily relied on tipped workers. Even worse, such convoluted timekeeping requirements directly impact how much pay Americans take home. Like many of my colleagues, I want to see Americans rewarded for their hard work and ensure they are paid what they earn. That's why I'm proud to rise in support of H.R. 2312, the Tipped Employee Protection Act, which creates stability for tipped workers and preserves opportunities for them to earn a good wage. The bill creates a clear, common-sense definition of a tipped worker and prevents future attempts by misguided activist judges and bureaucrats seeking to implement policies that hurt workers' bottom lines. The Tipped Employee Protection Act also ensures workers at least earn the minimum wage, and the bill respects states' authority to set higher wage levels.
Congressman Tim Walberg, Republican from Michigan, chair of the Education and Workforce Committee on the House floor. Congressman Stephen Horsford, Democrat from Nevada, opposed the bill.
Mr. Speaker, this debate comes down to one simple question. What's fair for tipped workers? All across America, and especially in my home state of Nevada, tipped workers show up every day, serving food, cleaning rooms, keeping our restaurants, hotels, and casinos running. They work hard, and they deserve to be paid fairly for every hour that they work. Under current law, there's a common sense protection in place. A worker can only be paid a tip wage if their job actually depends on tips. That's why the law says workers must regularly earn tips before an employer can pay a sub-minimum wage. That rule exists to prevent abuse. H.R. 2312, the Tipped Employee Protection Act, so-called, tears down that protection. Under this bill, an employer could say, you earned a tip once this week, so now every hour you work now counts as tipped work. A worker could wait tables one night, earn a few tips, and then spend the rest of the week cooking, cleaning, or washing dishes, and still be paid as little as $2.13 an hour for that work. That's not tip work, that's a pay cut. That's why we need to pass My Tips Act, which would raise the wage for tip workers, which has not been raised since 1991, the year I graduated high school, not cut them. This GOP bill lets employers average tips however they want, over whatever time period they choose, and use that as an excuse to lower wages for hours when workers are not earning tips at all. And let's be honest, tips aren't guaranteed. They depend on the customer, the shift, the economy, and pure luck. That's why tips are gifts, not a guarantee, not wages. No worker should have to gamble with their paycheck just to make rent or to put food on the table. So I urge my colleagues, stand with working people, stand with tip workers, and vote no on H.R. 2312.
Congressman Stephen Horsford, Democrat from Nevada, on the House floor. And as we head to air, the House has not yet voted on this bill. House also taking up two other bills today. One, to let employers offer voluntary job-related training outside of work hours without it counting as paid work time. And the other to remove what the supporters call unnecessary regulations to make it easier for employers to provide child care and dependent care assistance. Follow the House live gavel to gavel on C-SPAN television and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Washington Today continues in a moment.
In a divided media world, one place brings Americans together. According to a new Magid research report, nearly 90 million Americans turn to C-SPAN, and they're almost perfectly balanced. 28% conservative, 27% liberal or progressive, 41% moderate. Republicans watching Democrats, Democrats watching Republicans, moderates watching all sides. Because C-SPAN viewers want the facts, straight from the source. No commentary, no agenda, just democracy, unfiltered, every day on the C-SPAN networks.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Associated Press writing that the death toll from nationwide protests in Iran surpassed 2,000 people on Tuesday, activists said, as Iranians made phone calls abroad for the first time in days after authorities severed communications during a crackdown on demonstrators. The number of dead climbed to at least 2,003, as reported by the U.S.-based human rights activist news agency. That figure dwarfs the death toll from any other round of protest or unrest in Iran in decades and recalls the chaos surrounding the country's 1979 Islamic Revolution. That was from the Associated Press. President Trump posting on Truth Social today, Iranian patriots keep protesting, take over your institutions, save the names of the killers and abusers. They'll pay a big price. I have canceled all meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. Help is on the way. And then MIGA, which apparently stands for Make Iran Great Again. That post from President Trump. The president also spoke about this at the start of his speech at the Detroit Economic Club.
And by the way, to all Iranian patriots, keep protesting, take over your institutions if possible, and save the name of the killers and the abusers that are abusing you. You're being very badly abused. If the numbers are right now, I hear 5 different sets of numbers. I hear numbers. Look, 1 death is too much. But I hear much lower numbers, and then I hear much higher numbers. But I say save their names because they'll pay a very big price. And I've canceled all meetings with the Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. And all I say to them is help is on its way. You saw that I put tariffs on anybody doing business with Iran. Just went into effect today. And I say make Iran great again. You know, it was a great country until these monsters came in and took it over. And it's all very fragile. What would have happened to us? I'm telling you. If I didn't win this election, what would have happened to us?
President Donald Trump of the Detroit Economic Club. Reuters reporting on that 25% import tariff on products from any country doing business with Iran that the president has announced. Iran is a major oil exporter. They write Tehran has not responded publicly to Trump's announcement of the tariffs, but it was swiftly criticized by China. Iran, already under heavy U.S. sanctions, exports much of its oil to China, with Turkey, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, and India among other top trading partners. On Capitol Hill, Congressman Jason Crow, Democrat from Colorado, spoke about President Trump's response to the protests in Iran.
Well, we completely stand with the people of Iran who are yearning for freedom and democracy. I mean, they are victims of this oppressive, violent regime. There are many ways for us to support the Iranian people short of military action, because it's not in America's best interest to start a war with Iran. In fact, it's not even in the Iranian people's best interests for the United States to go to war with Iran. It is highly unfortunate, though, that the Trump administration and Donald Trump have spent the last year dismantling many of the tools and the agencies and the departments and the things that we have at our disposal to support the Iranian people and the people around the world who are in exactly this type of situation. Like U.S. aid, like our communications capabilities, so many of the tools, the soft power tools of the United States government that we would use to support people who are yearning for freedom and democracy have been dismantled and gutted by this administration. That said, there are still mechanisms to support short of war, and this is exactly the point why we're standing here, is we don't believe that this administration or any administration should start a war with a foreign country unless this body debates it and votes on it. Because that's exactly why for 20 years we spent trillions of dollars and thousands of American lives and failed in nation building, and it ended poorly, right? So support the Iranian people, do so with the tools that we have available, but military conflict would not serve the interests of the Iranian people or the American people.
Congressman Jason Crow, Democrat from Colorado, at a news conference with other House Democratic leaders this morning in the U.S. Capitol building. More from the Reuters article. Iranian authorities have accused the U.S. and Israel of fomenting the unrest. Russia on Tuesday condemned what it described as subversive external interference in Iran's internal politics, saying any repeat of last year's U.S. strikes would have disastrous consequences for the Middle East and international security. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth begins another AP article, said Monday that Elon Musk's artificial intelligence chatbot Grok will join Google's generative AI engine in operating inside the Pentagon network as part of a broader push to feed as much of the military's data as possible into the developing technology. AP also writes the announcement comes just days after Grok, which is embedded into X, the social media network owned by Musk, drew global outcry and scrutiny for generating highly sexualized deepfake images of people without their consent. Pete Hegseth spoke at Elon Musk's space flight company SpaceX in South Texas Monday evening.
President Trump's AI executive order spells out our approach succinctly. It is the policy of the United States to sustain and enhance America's global AI dominance in defense of human flourishing, economic competitiveness, and national security. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the War Department's mission. We must ensure that America's military AI dominance, so that no adversary can exploit that same technology to hold our national security interests or our citizens at risk. America first in every domain. Last month, I took the first step toward changing how the department does business with frontier AI technologies when we announced the rollout of Gen AI with our partners from Google. And I want to thank the Google team for leaning forward and making the investment to get their Gemini app to about 3 million users in the War Department. But today, we're excited to announce the next frontier AI model company to join GenAI.mil, and that is Grok from xAI, which will go live later this month. So I want to thank you, Elon, and your incredible team for leaning forward with us on this as well. Very soon, we will have the world's leading AI models on every unclassified and classified network throughout our department. Long overdue. To further that, today at my direction, we're executing an AI acceleration strategy that will extend our lead in military AI established during President Trump's first term. This strategy will unleash experimentation, eliminate bureaucratic barriers, focus on investments, and demonstrate the execution approach needed to ensure we lead in military AI and that it grows more dominant into the future. In short, we will win this race by becoming an AI-first warfighting force across all domains, from the back offices of the Pentagon to the tactical edge on the front lines.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at SpaceX headquarters in Texas on Monday, a small town officially named Starbase, with a SpaceX founder, Elon Musk, who introduced Hegseth by saying the purpose of his company is "We want to make Star Trek real." And then when Hegseth walked on stage, he did flash the Star Trek Vulcan salute. New York Times reporting that 6 federal prosecutors in Minnesota resigned on Tuesday over the Justice Department's push to investigate the widow of a woman killed by an ICE agent and the department's reluctance to investigate the shooter, according to people with knowledge of their decision. And this from Axios. Last week's shootings in Minneapolis and Portland have supercharged a push by Democrats in Congress to use an upcoming government funding deadline to try to slash funding to ICE. Congressional Progressive Caucus members did hold a news conference today on this. Ilhan Omar is a Democrat from Minnesota.
I am beyond heartbroken and outraged that the Trump administration's actions led to Renee Nicole Good's murder. Her final words before being shot were calm and non-threatening. She said, "That's fine, dude. I'm not mad at you." Those are the words of someone attempting to de-escalate, not someone posing a lethal threat. After the shots were fired, the agent is heard saying, "Bitch." This did not happen in isolation. This was not an accident, and it was certainly not inevitable. This killing is the direct consequence of deliberate choices made by Donald Trump and his administration. Over the last few months, the president has repeatedly inflamed tensions, espoused hateful rhetoric, and intensified attacks on Minnesotans, especially the Somali community. ICE's increasingly violent actions have terrorized our state and culminated in this needless loss of life. This is what happens when you give people with guns impunity. Dangerous things take place. To be clear, demanding accountability is not radical. Calling for systematic reforms are not extreme. This is the bare minimum required to restore safety and justice back to our communities. The American people deserve answers and accountability. They deserve to live without fear of federal agents acting as judge, jury, and executioner in our streets. And so today, I am glad to announce that the Congressional Progressive Caucus has adopted an official position to hold ICE accountable. Our caucus members will oppose all funding for immigration enforcement in any appropriation bills until meaningful reforms are enacted to end militarized policing practices. We cannot and we should not continue to fund agencies that operate with impunity, that escalate violence, and that undermine the very freedoms this country claims to uphold.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Democrat from Minnesota, at a Congressional Progressive Caucus news conference in Washington. And the Homeland Security Department, which includes ICE, is one of the departments still yet to be funded for fiscal year 2027. And January 31st is the deadline, or there could be a partial government shutdown. ABC News writing, a majority of voters, 57%, say Renee Good's shooting at the hands of an ICE agent was not justified, according to a poll released Tuesday by Quinnipiac University. The poll, which surveyed 1,133 self-identified registered voters nationwide between January 8th and 12th, showed a split along party lines. 92% of Democratic voters and 59% of independents say they thought the shooting was not justified. 10% of Republicans say it was not justified. That was from ABC News. Congressman Tom Emmer, Republican from Minnesota, the House Minority Whip, spoke about this today at a House Republican leadership news conference. Not only the federal immigration crackdown, but the federal fraud investigation that's going on in his state.
I want to begin by thanking President Trump and his all-star cabinet and federal law enforcement who have been working around the clock in my home state of Minnesota to combat rampant fraud and remove criminal illegal aliens from our communities. The worst of the worst are coming off our streets thanks to the immigration and customs enforcement officers. This includes murderers, rapists, kidnappers, and pedophiles. Yet you wouldn't know about this because our worthless paper, the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, doesn't report the truth. Law enforcement officers are repeatedly harassed, assaulted, and demonized by paid agitators and failed and corrupt politicians who care more about scoring points with the radicals in their party than enforcing the rule of law and keeping Minnesota safe. Minnesota's so-called leaders, like Governor Tim Walz, Attorney General Keith Ellison, and Mayor Jacob Fry, would rather go to war with the Trump administration than get criminal illegal aliens out of our communities and expose the fraud that's been allowed to run rampant on their watch. Once again, the Democrats have shown their true colors. Look no further than their ridiculous lawsuit yesterday. They're choosing to protect horrific criminals over law-abiding Minnesotans, and they're using your taxpayer dollars to do it.
Congressman Tom Emmer, Republican from Minnesota, the House Minority Whip, at a House Republican leadership news conference. Fox News reporting the Trump administration is ending temporary protection status, TPS, for Somalia, affecting several thousand Somalis currently living in the U.S. and several hundred currently living in Minnesota under the protection. Somali migrants with TPS will be required to leave the country by March 17th. That was from Fox News. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, Republican of Kentucky, begins a Washington Post article, threatened Tuesday to hold Bill Clinton in contempt of Congress after the former president declined to appear before the panel for a closed-door deposition related to its investigation of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Congressman Comer spoke to reporters in the hallway.
Everyone knows by now Bill Clinton did not show up, and I think it's important to note that this subpoena was voted on in a bipartisan manner by this committee. This wasn't something that I just issued as chairman of the committee. This was voted on by the entire committee in a unanimous vote of the House Oversight Committee to subpoena former President Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Now, Hillary Clinton's supposed to show up tomorrow. We'll see what happens there. But with respect to the former president, he did not show up today. One reason I think most Americans want President Clinton to answer some questions is because he visited the White House. Jeffrey Epstein visited the White House 17 times while Bill Clinton was president. I've been in Congress 9 years. I think I've been to the White House 9 times in 9 years. Epstein was in the White House double the amount of time that I was under one president. And then we know that Bill Clinton flew on Epstein's plane somewhere around 27 times after the presidency. So no one's accusing Bill Clinton of any wrongdoing. We just have questions, and that's why the Democrats voted along with Republicans to subpoena Bill Clinton. Not a single Democrat showed up today. Not a single Democrat. The ones that have press conferences on the Capitol steps and talk about how they're trying to get justice for the victims and all that. It just seems like they only care about questioning Republicans. And we've had a former Trump cabinet secretary, Acosta, in for a grilling. We had Bill Barr, former attorney general, in for a grilling. But for whatever reason, President Clinton didn't show up, and the Democrats on the committee don't seem to have a problem. This is the amount of preparation that went into this deposition today. These were the questions that we were prepared to ask. We've communicated with President Clinton's legal team for months now, giving them opportunity after opportunity to come in, to give us a date, and they continue to delay to the point where we had no idea whether they're going to show up today or not. I think it's very disappointing. As a result of Bill Clinton not showing up for his lawful subpoena, which again was voted on unanimously by the committee in a bipartisan manner, we will move next week in the House Oversight Committee markup to hold former President Clinton in contempt of Congress.
House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer, Republican of Kentucky, speaking to reporters outside the room where the deposition with Bill Clinton was to take place. At a news conference of House Democratic leaders, the caucus chair Pete Aguilar of California was asked about this.
Today, the Clintons announced that they will not be following a subpoena with the House Oversight Committee. What is the caucus's reaction to the Clintons' decision, and what's the path going forward?
I don't think there's any oversight, Democrats here, but that's a decision that obviously we just saw. Republicans continue to distract from the American people. They continue to want to focus on what doesn't matter. This is the same group that said for months they didn't want to release the Epstein files and that nothing was there. And so now they want to embrace this and score political points with testimony. That's a decision for the Clintons to make. But House Democrats are focused on, one, the administration carrying out the law to release the Epstein files, no matter what they say or who they name. But scoring political points and bringing people in for testimony, that's just something that House Republicans want to do to take our eye off the ball, take the American people's eye off the ball.
Congressman Pete Aguilar, Democrat of California, the caucus chair at a news conference. Back to the Washington Post article. In a letter to Congressman Comer, the Clintons called the subpoenas from the panel invalid and legally unenforceable. The Clintons noted that they had provided Comer with sworn statements similar to those he had accepted from other subpoenaed individuals who were later excused from testifying before the committee. The Clintons wrote, "We are confident that any reasonable person in or out of Congress will see, based on everything we release, that what you are doing is trying to punish those who you see as your enemies and to protect those you think are your friends." Reporting from the Washington Post. From NBC News, Scott Adams, the Dilbert creator whose cartoon was dropped by hundreds of newspapers after he made racist remarks, died months after revealing his diagnosis with prostate cancer, his family said on Tuesday. President Donald Trump praised Adams as a fantastic guy who liked and respected me when it wasn't fashionable to do so. Trump said in a statement he bravely fought a long battle against a terrible disease. My condolences go out to his family and all of his many friends and listeners. That was from NBC News. Scott Adams was on C-SPAN 2's Book TV in 2019 about his book, Loser Think: How Untrained Brains Are Ruining America.
So one of the things I learned doing the Dilbert comic is that mockery is incredibly powerful. And people would say to me, I can't tell you how many people have said this, lots of people over the years, they would write to me an email and say, we were going to do this, certain policy at work, but we saw a comic of yours mocking it, so we decided not to, because nobody wants to do the thing that's already been pre-mocked. It's like you don't even have to wait. I mocked you in advance. You don't even have to wait. No waiting. So, and in fact, even Elon Musk, when he was writing a memo to his employees telling them how he wanted them to behave, what the culture should be like, one of his tips was to not do anything, policy-wise, that would make it into a Dilbert comic. Now, the power of that is that he didn't have to explain what that meant, because everybody who's familiar with the word Dilbert and the comic, they can kind of, one when you see him, right? It's like, that's a Dilbert situation there. So I use that same technique by coming up with a word, loser think, that people can use and say, hey, that's loser think.
Scott Adams, the creator of the comic strip Dilbert, on C-SPAN 2's Book TV in 2019 on his book, Loser Think: How Untrained Brains Are Ruining America. He has died at the age of 68. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Remember, the C-SPAN Network's now available on Hulu Plus Live TV. Learn more at hulu.com/live TV. And for the latest on what's been going on in Washington, sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word at cspan.org. Hope you have a good night.